Okay. I guess that's. I guess that's okay. I mean, it's crooked. I don't have any instructions for this thing, nor do I have any experience in using it until I started doing this. So, it's the camera is slightly crooked, but I don't really know how to fix that. So, okay. So when we last left off, we had Joseph as a young man somewhere in his 20s, probably, well, most undoubtedly, in Egypt. It's just distracting me personally because it's just crooked, and I don't understand. Oh well, I don't have any instructions for this thing. My brother-in-law got it for my mom for Christmas. They used it once at her house. If any instructions came with it, I don't know where they got to, and so I just have the thing itself, and have no prior experience using any of these kinds of things. So anyway, so we had just read about Joseph's adventures in prison and his dream forecasting on behalf of the cupbearer and baker. Of course, Joseph is no longer bragging about his own ability to have dreams or interpret dreams. He is now giving the credit to the dream for his dream interpreting ability straight to God. Now Genesis 41. When 2 full years had passed, so it's been a while still, he's still in prison, Pharaoh had a dream. I have to keep an eye on that cat. She's on the move. Let's see. He was standing by the Nile. So we're going to get Pharaoh's dream here right in the text. Standing by the Nile, when out of the river, the Nile River, there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile, and stood beside those on the river bank. Be quiet. Oh my goodness. She just drives me nuts when she starts doing this. I'm not sure if her meowing is being picked up on this microphone. But man, oh man, when she starts doing that, it just drives me crazy. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. I'm sorry, I have to constantly keep track of her because she could dash over here and destroy this camera very quickly. I have to make sure I know where she is at all times because she definitely has the ability to sneak in and destroy this thing before I can stop her if I'm not constantly keeping an eye on her. He fell asleep again, so he woke up in the middle of the night, apparently, puffing and puffing. You know how in the movies they shoot up out of the bed and act like they're wide awake or whatever. So he must have woken up overnight, probably disturbed, bothered by this dream he'd had, and then he went to lie back down and go back to sleep again. So he fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. Remember, the east wind is the hot, dry desert wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning, his mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard." Cat, what are you doing down there? I don't like the way you're looking up there like that, Cat. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged, or impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. So he has to make a good impression on Pharaoh. This is his chance to get out of jail. Egyptians were clean-shaven. This is in stark contrast to the Hebrews, who were very, very prideful of their beards. The Egyptian artwork often portrays Egyptian officials with these short, little, thin beards dangling down from their chins. But those actually weren't real. Those are fake. Even female pharaohs were depicted with these short, little, thin, tight beards underneath their chins. So those the beards that they were, I don't know what kind of beard you would call that, but those beards that they're depicted with in their monuments and in their artwork are not real. In fact, they're not always depicted that way either. There are monuments and artwork of the pharaohs and other officials without those beards. So they were clean shaven. They were a clean shaven culture. The Hebrews were not. The Hebrews were very, 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 very prideful of their beards. You did not shave a Hebrew man's face. That was a mark of extreme dishonor and disgrace. Later on in time, in the New Testament times, the Greeks and the Romans will be generally clean shaven. The Jews still, though, kept their beards. They were and I think a lot of Orthodox Jews to this day would have long beards. I'm not entirely certain if their law commanded them to have beards. It does command them to keep their beards trimmed a certain way. I'm not sure if, depending on how you read that, some people read into that a command to actually have a beard. I don't know if it necessarily is that. I don't know if it necessarily is a specific command to have beards. But there is a command to keep your beards trimmed a certain way. So they were very big on their beards. But the Egyptians were not. They were clean shaven. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to Pharaoh. "But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first." That must have been I'm assuming the eating up of the fat cows was the disturbing part of the dream. Ever had a dream like that? I've never had a dream that I believe was given to me straight from God as a prophecy of future events. I mean, I've never had that. I don't think anybody's ever had that. I'm quite confident anybody who's listening to this video, watching this video, or listening to my voice, has never actually had that happen. If you say you've had that happen, frankly, I'm not going to believe you. But I have had dreams where something, there was some an image, a memory, a certain thing, a certain visual in the dream that I remembered, and then like something weird happened or something very disturbing happened, and I would wake up and I'm thinking, oh, you know, I think everybody's had something like that before. Like you've had dreams you get into a car accident or something like that. So I believe the cow, the ugly lean cows eating up the healthy good fat cows is probably the part that just really shook Pharaoh. It's probably a very disturbing visual in his dream. By the way, Pharaoh himself is giving this recount of his dreams. Earlier on, we read the text, the writer, the Genesis writer's own, I guess you could say, almost objective account of it. Now we're hearing Pharaoh give his account of it, and he's adding a little bit more detail, a little bit more flavor to his description of what happened to impress us about how much of a nightmare this was. We would probably call it a nightmare. I'm not sure if their language at the time had a word for nightmare, I don't know. But we would probably call something like this more of a nightmare than a dream. Excuse me. So the lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that had come up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. If he hadn't woken up here, he wouldn't remember the dream. You only remember the dreams you have right before you wake up. In my dreams I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. The thin heads of grain. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this all to the magicians, but none could explain it to me. It doesn't seem as though the dream of the heads of grain bothered Pharaoh as much as the dreams of the cows. That's probably why he had the dreams of the cows first. If he'd had the dreams of the heads of grain first, he might not have taken it so seriously. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt. But 7 years of famine will follow them." Oh no, oh no, oh no. "Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine." This plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God, or the gods?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So he's not going to be made Pharaoh, but he will be made Pharaoh's right-hand man. We call this position today the vizier, or prime minister sometimes. I'm not actually sure what the Egyptian term for it was, but we call it today the vizier, or the prime minister. Actually, Egypt itself isn't really with the term that they used to call themselves. I mean, that itself is a term that came along later. So I don't know what they called themselves, or what the word was that they used to call this position. But we call it vizier. We call Egypt Egypt, and even that wasn't what they called themselves at the time. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen, so he's got his multicolored robe back, and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and men shouted before him, Make way! Then he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift hand or foot in all of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah, which is probably a Hebrewized, garbled way of saying Joseph who is called Paneah, and Paneah itself means the one who lives. So this term, Zaphanath-Paneah, probably translates ultimately to something like Joseph who is called the one who lives. And gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Not the Potiphar that we knew before, but someone named Potiphar, priest of On. And On is what? Heliopolis. Okay, so a place called Heliopolis. To be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, or Heliopolis. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh. Manasseh sounds like and may be derived from the Hebrew for forget, and said, It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. The second son he named Ephraim. Ephraim sounds like the Hebrew for twice fruitful, and said, It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, Go to Joseph and do what he tells you to do. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the world. Well, obviously, right here we can tell you, not all the countries in the world came to buy grain from Egypt, because the world is bigger than what the writer of this text knew at the time. People living in the Americas did not come to Egypt to buy grain. People living in South Africa did not come to Egypt to buy grain. People living in Australia did not come to Egypt to buy grain. People living in East Asia did not come to Egypt to buy grain. People living in Western Europe did not come to Egypt to buy grain. So when it says all the world, it really means all the areas around Israel. Okay, it's like that's not. We should not take that to be literally every country on the globe, every country on planet Earth that exists at the time. So that tells us right there that not every word in the Bible can be considered literally true, and that's okay. That's okay. That's some people have a real hang up with that. Some people have a real hang up with that, but that's okay. Okay, it's like it's not every word needs to be literally true. We need to understand that's okay. Okay, like that's as far as this writer Moses is concerned. All the countries around where that he was familiar with came to Egypt to buy grain. Not all the countries in the world did. I can promise you that. Like I said, no one was coming to Egypt from the Americas. Whoever was here at the time, nobody was coming from Egypt from down deeper south into Africa or from, like I said, Eastern Asia or Western Europe. They weren't coming that far. The famine wasn't affecting that many countries. But it was affecting all the countries around Israel. And that's what the writer means by this. Go ahead and make a new video.